Thank you very much, Chris. It's great to be with you folks today, and congratulations on your convention here. We do have a lot of very good discussions, and you know, if we agreed on everything, probably wouldn't need one of us, probably. Is that right? But we always look forward to your visits and to get your point of view, and that truly is what it's all about. This meeting today, I'm pleased to see several familiar faces out here, and thanks for what you do, because you're very concerned, obviously, about the family farm operations, and to keep what is the basis of Iowa and that family part of it. That is really what it is all about. And Chris touched on it, but you know, having grown up in Alexander, Iowa, which is a town of 168 people, and where my farm is, you know, I basically lived and grew up in the suburbs of Alexander, on a farm about a mile outside of town there, and continues to be a family farm operation. My two brothers, myself, Chris mentioned the seed business, Latham Seeds. You know, we're one of the few left in the country as far as family seed operations, and it's because of the concentration that we're seeing throughout our nation, throughout the world, in these industries, and the amount of wealth that is being transferred out, but also I don't know of any huge corporation that actually cares that much about you as an individual, and that you know, we try to build our business on our name, on our family reputation, and all of those things. And so much of that has been lost, I think, over the past few years, and that is really unfortunate, because it is the basis of what we are as Iowans, and I think the whole country, as far as family businesses and family operations. You know, growing up there with four older brothers, and I was the youngest of five boys. You know, we had every kind of livestock you could possibly have on the farm, and from gathering eggs and getting my nose pecked by a hen, getting eggs out of the all of those things that we all did. Let me just talk a little bit about the farm bill that was passed this year, and maybe and contrast a little bit from what the farm bill that was passed in 2002. I voted for this one, and I voted against the previous one, and I think for a lot of the reasons that you had concerns previously. Yeah, back in 2002, that farm bill was crafted with the idea of how much money can you spend. There was no thought of policy going through it. It was all of, if you remember back, the big budget battle on whether we're going to get $70 billion more to put in a farm bill, and finally got that agreement, and then try to put policy in to spend the money, which is totally upside down. A thoughtful process would have policy and then try to find the money to do it. And I think that is a real contrast, certainly, to what happened this year. Colin Peterson, a very, very good friend of mine, who we talk every day about agricultural policy, I think did a great job. Back in 2002, when I talked of why I was going to vote against that farm bill, it simply was because you could see with all the incentives in place that you were going to have the kind of consolidation and big farmers take over from what we had previously. It was a huge incentive and put a lot of, especially new farmers, at a disadvantage. They simply could not compete with the large operations that were out there as far as rents, and be able to compete against those big operators that had existing land, could absorb a lot more land. And it was because of the payment limitations. If you remember the EQIP program, at that time, people like Jack DeCoster up in Wright County could get $400,000 to build more confinement buildings. And it's just insane as far as I was concerned. So I did vote against that bill. That bill also, I mean, it had money in it for conservation, but with all the incentives for more production, it really was meaningless in a lot of ways. You know, this farm bill that was passed, and if you'll, which I voted for, I voted the override twice with the president this year. I think just, again, the whole process was so much better. And Colin Peterson did, once again, a very, very good job. It's not perfect. We could have done a lot more, I think, as far as payment limitations in the bill. That becomes, as you all know, it becomes a regional issue. It's not a policy issue. You've got the big producers down in the South, the senators who would not support a bill that really took off those payment limitations. It took the first step to limitations, but in the 3-entity rule, things like that, but most of that will be gotten around with the loan rates and being able to take advantage of those for those big operations, which I think is unfortunate. We did include, as you well know, and I commend you, and this is one of the issues that Chris and I and a lot of you folks have been discussing for a long time, the country of origin labeling. And I will, and I really congratulate you for your hard work on that. And that is something I will tell you, with talking to Peterson every day. You know, he said that, you know, that's something I don't care what happens, is going to be in this farm bill because of you folks, and that's what he said. He says that's the only thing that you folks, you know, you to support the bill, you didn't like it but accepted a bunch of other things, and I'm going to make sure that that's done for you. And I commend you for that. And I also commend you for the fact that the way it was written, and I had real concerns about the idea that it would reduce what farmers received and increase what it would cost at the consumer level. And I think those issues were addressed very well. And that is a great accomplishment, and your organization gets all the credit for that, I can assure you. We were able to maintain a strong safety net, even though we didn't make as much progress as I'd like as far as payment limitations. The conservation portion in the bill increasing by about $8 billion, which is a great investment. We've got to make sure that we continue to do that with the floods that we've seen this year. We see how important that is, the buffer zones, all the conservation stuff that's out there, the farm levies, all the work that we've done over the years to try and conserve our soil, which is our greatest natural resource by far. And I get, you know, really frustrated with people in Washington that somehow don't think that farmers care about the land or about soil erosion, things like that. You know, that is our greatest asset as farmers. That is what gives us our livelihood, gives us the hope for every year of a good crop. And the idea somehow that we don't care about that is simply wrong. And the farmers were the first environmentalists and the first conservationists, because they understand the value of conservation and preserving their greatest asset. Nutritional funding was increased by about $10 billion in the bill. And hopefully all the appropriations will keep up with it, and that's part of my job also. And it's, I think, very important as the rules and regulations are put in place on this farm bill to hold the administration accountable to making sure that it's implemented the way that it was written. And that is something that this is my 14th year in Congress, and I can assure you that the intent of a lot of legislation is bypassed by the bureaucrats, and they write it the way they darn well please, and the heck with you, even though you can have clear report language directing them that this is what you mean by that legislation. They oftentimes will ignore it and go on the way they've always done things in the past. Just as you know, someone who serves on the Appropriations Committee, I serve on the Ag Appropriations Subcommittee that obviously does all the functions of the USDA and the FDA. I have served on Energy and Water, which has a lot of the environmental EPA stuff on it, Army Corps of Engineers projects, things like that. I'm very, very frustrated this year, and I'll be very candid with you. The fact that we have not done one appropriation bill this year. If there's one basic function of the federal government, it's to at least go through the process and fund the government for the next year or go, and make sure those bills are done. There are 12 appropriation bills. We have not had one of them go to the president yet this year. What that means for Iowa is that a lot of the initiatives that a lot of us, we've all worked, Senator Harkin is on the Appropriation Committee on the Senate side, I'm on the House side, but we try very hard to put money in for conservation initiatives, for buffer zones, for trees forever, agriability, which helps disabled farmers. That is all basically out the window, since we're going to have at the end of September what they call a continuing resolution, which is just basically flat funding from last year with no changes. So everything that you have wanted as far as changes, you bump stuff up, you take programs out, defund them, that either those projects are completed or they're no longer needed. None of those initiatives are going to happen. The process, and this Congress has been basically, and I think the last 3 years, it's been all politics in Washington. This system is broken as it is today. I'm just very hopeful, whatever happens this fall, that when Congress comes back next year, we'll have a new president. I hope we can have a new start, that people can finally quit throwing bombs at each other and actually try to work together and get things done for the American people. You have to be, like in agriculture, being a farmer, you have to be an eternal optimist in this job also. But the one overwhelming issue that is facing, I think, everyone today, certainly in agriculture, is the high cost of energy. And the fact that Congress has not done anything for 30 years, basically, to help us become energy independent is a shame. We should be all ashamed. It's a catastrophe for us, for our economy. It is probably the most regressive tax you could have on people who are low income, oftentimes have to drive the farthest to go to work. They have probably the least efficient cars to get to work. And the people on fixed incomes, if you're like folks on Social Security, any kind of pensions, it is the most regressive tax you can have. And in agriculture, it's about 60% of the cost of putting a crop in today is directly related to energy. And when we look at the cost of fertilizer today for diesel fuel, anhydrous ammonia, all of the inputs, the drying costs, that we'll see what kind of fall we have this year, but that could be tremendous with the late crop we have. It is a major, major factor, and those input costs, unless something is done about the energy situation in this country, are not going to go down, no matter what the market does. That they're going to stay up there. What I am supporting, will continue to push as hard as I can, is a comprehensive energy policy that will look at conservation, first of all, talking about having incentives in place for people to insulate their homes, to do things better, to purchase vehicles that are much more energy efficient, all of those things that can really help cut down the utilization. We've got to make sure that we keep in place the incentives for renewable energy. I mean, the ethanol, the soy diesel, biomass, the wind, which has become such a major factor in our economy right here in Iowa, solar, geothermal, all of those things that can really help us as far as using less energy and renewable energy. And that is very, very important. I think we also have to look at the fact that we haven't built a new refinery in this country for the last 30 years. And the ones we have are all in one pocket down right in Hurricane Alley, so that if we get another hurricane, it shuts down and diesel goes way up, gas goes way up. And we're so fragile as far as our situation is and subject to those type of weather occurrences, that we've got to be able to build new refineries out there. And the opportunity we have today with all the base closings around the country, that we can in fact put those refineries on those bases that are closed. They're brownfield sites anyway, put them in and build them as quickly as possible. The fact of the matter is, even what we do today with all the renewables, all of the incentives we can in conservation, we still are going to be based on a fossil fuel economy for the next 10 to 15 years. And the fact that we have to go after the resources we have right here in America. We're, T. Boone Pickens talking about $700 billion a year going over to other countries, and many of them are not real friendly to us. When we subsidize the King of Saudi Arabia, and we subsidize our good friends in Iran, who are nuts, I'm sorry, but and send money down to like Venezuela. Hugo Chavez 2 weeks ago was in Moscow buying weapons, and we're sending him about $180 million a day buying energy from him, oil from him. And that's certainly, I don't think those weapons are going to create peace in South America today. And that is, I think, is a tremendous problem that we have. And the quicker we can get to the point where we don't have to subsidize those foreign governments. And remember that 94% of the oil in the world available today is owned by foreign countries. And we can talk about big oil and all that here, but the fact of the matter is what they do has little or no effect on the world market, because it's countries that own the available oil production today. So I think we've got to go after offshore for natural gas, which is such a huge part of agriculture. We're paying sometimes 3 to 4 times more for natural gas than they are, say, in Russia or China and a lot of parts of the world that are competitors with us. I think we've got to go up to Alaska and go in that. Many people aren't aware of the fact that the Alaskan pipeline today is only running about 30–40% of its capacity. And if that continues, that downward trend as far as production up there, if that's going to shut down economically, you can't keep it going. We can do things in such an environmentally friendly way today. I think one great example from the hurricanes back with Katrina and Rita is the fact that not one drop of oil was spilled because of those storms with all of the wells that are in the western part of the Gulf. But we have to go after American energy. It's about our American independence. It's about creating hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of really good American jobs right here. And that, I think, is so important. So I would hope that we could pull together and get a vote to actually move us towards energy independence for America, because it is not only a national security issue, it's a homeland security issue with what they're going to do with the dollars that we're sending overseas. It's certainly an economic security issue. Everybody talks about the people from other places buying our national debt and all that. Well, the balance of trade, $700 billion a year going to other countries certainly is the major factor as far as that balance of trade today. Chris, that's all I guess I had to say, but I would much rather try to answer questions or have a conversation here with you folks, but just thank you very much for the chance to be here today. We've been... No questions? Yes?
In regards to your the Drill America First program, I work in energy efficiency and renewable energy, and they say, John McCain put out a tire gauge to represent Obama's energy plan, but the fact is that if we properly inflate our tires, we can save 3% of the gasoline, and if we tune our cars up, we can save 4%. But they say that drilling offshore and in Alaska can only give us 1% more gasoline. Your comments, sir?
Well, I think we need to do it all. mean, that's, and I'm all for everybody going out and checking your tires. And, you know, most cars today, you don't tune them up anyway because they're electronic ignitions and regulations, but we do everything. That still isn't going to get us to where America is dependent on foreign oil. I don't care what individual things we do. I'm all for it. You know, let's do it all. But the great thing about if we would actually go after some of the resources that we have in abundance, 97% of the known energy offshore today is under moratorium. I mean, think about the tremendous oil and natural gas that we have out there that's available to us, and the idea of Cuba working with China now, as far as them beginning to the idea of drilling right off, 45 miles from Florida. I can assure you that American engineering, our scientists can do it much more environmentally friendly than probably the Chinese ever thought about. And I would also suggest that we take the royalties that we get from the federal government, to the federal government from this, and invest it all into the best engineers, the best scientists, the best technicians in the world that are right here to get us to the point 15 years from now where we don't need those people at all. I'm saying let's do everything.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What's the status of looking into things like light rail to sort of get us all out of our cars and in a much more efficient way? I would love to see light rail from Des Moines to Minneapolis, from Des Moines and maybe Iowa City to Chicago. That could save an enormous amount.
Well, I think that would be great. I don't know if where you find the money to do it right now, and that's part of the problem. Certainly, that would be a great thing. We have enough trouble, and it's not the most efficient thing, but Amtrak is subsidized very, very heavily. The only part of the current rail system that we have that makes money is on the eastern coast. We've got tickets going today from, I think it's from Houston to Los Angeles, where the federal government's subsidizing to the tune of about $350 a ticket today for ridership going on those trains. And it's, first of all, I think that if you maybe ran the trains where there were people, it would help too, through Iowa here, through population centers. But it's simply a matter of money and a matter of will. I think it would be tremendous. But compared to the European model has a much denser population base and it works better there. But we have an awful time even keeping Amtrak going today. I'd love to see the day we did that. It's just find me the money. Maybe we should use that with some of the royalties too. Yes.
Has there ever been any talk in the Farm Bill? Like our neighbor, for example, is the farmer, and land that he owns, he's put in buffer strips and manages to do quite well, but a lot of his land he cash rents, and the owners don't want to invest any money in buffer strip or tiling or anything. Has there ever been any talk in the Farm Bill about giving preferential subsidies to farmers who farm and own their own land as opposed to cash renters?
I really don't know of any kind of discussion in that regard. And I think Peterson and I talked about every aspect of the Farm Bill that ever came up, but I don't remember any real discussion of that. Let me remind me of another point as far as the Farm Bill. There's a lot of talk, about giving payments to people who are not involved in agriculture. And on the surface, I think that it makes sense. Why would we give Dennis Rodman or Sam Donaldson or something payments? You also have to look though at the effect that has as far as either with people crop sharing or cash rent. If in fact they cannot get payments, they will never crop share with a startup farmer. And the only way that they would ever get payments is if they are on a crop share basis. So you have to think about cause and effect sometimes, and limitations certainly in place, but I don't want to take away a young person's opportunity to get into agriculture. Probably the only way they're farming, the only way they can do it is to on a crop share basis today, and you're going to just take away any opportunity for that to happen if you totally exclude landowners from participating. Does that make sense? I mean, as much as I hate the idea of sending somebody in Chicago or something payments, but the effect that it has on that young startup farmer is dramatic also. So, yes, sir.
You're on the farm committee or ag committee.
I'm on the Ag Appropriations Committee, which is
Okay.
the money committee rather than the policy committee.
Okay, well then maybe I can't ask you the question.
Oh, you can ask me. I might not be able to answer.
I went in to sign up this year, and there's a little patch of ground that's just next to mine. It happens to be 7 acres.
Right.
And they told me I couldn't sign it up this year. What is the absolute idiocy and reasoning that got us that?
I'm not sure where that came from, other than the fact that I know that they were concerned about all of the paperwork and the expense of having, quote, hobby farmers that have little effect as far as production or whatever, but just the cost of servicing all those. I think that was the basis. I don't, Chris, maybe you know better than I do what that was about.
Try to find out, I'd be interested.
Okay. My understanding, it was more, all these hobby farmers out there that really have no impact at all and are not, that was the idea.
But this was right next door to me, and I'd been helping a guy out by renting it from a cash rent. And I go in there and I find out I can't collect on it because the next door neighbor can.
It's
He's
10
got
acres or
several
less.
thousand acres.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem that there's fairness in that.
I don't know where that came from.
Ask Chris.
I will. Yes.
Well, let's look at the biggest issue, the biggest picture that you set before us. Appreciate you coming so we can chat with you.
Sure.
Okay, it's the war now, 10 billion a month. Now, some of us have been arguing since before this war started that it will fail. You do not ever, with war, change an ideology. There is no way ever that war is going to do anything except spread the ideology that we say we're trying to destroy. I mean, every person that we kill that's an Islamist, there's millions of them, not just a few. There's millions and millions and millions. Everyone we kill is probably replaced from 10 to 20 to 50, more. Now, when are we going to deal with the idiocy of this? We have no money for anything. And if we continue this war, we're going to continue to have no money for anything. So this country continually erodes away basic freedom, constitutional protection, no money for infrastructure, bridges, they fall down in Minneapolis. I mean, you know what? I mean, when are we really going to wake up and decide that the whole thing's wrong? I mean, it is a police action that is going to deal with the leaders of this movement, like Osama, that is a police action. You're totally wrong that it's war. War will never do it. And we're never going to have any money. Now, what's your response to this?
Well, I would, first of all, the idea somehow that, I think about the Second World War.
This has nothing to do with the Second World War, period.
But your statement was, I'm not going to argue about it, but your statement was the war never changes anything.
No, I didn't say that. I said this war, I said a war against an ideology, you see, is not, you see, well, you surely know enough history to know that many German people were
It's a
not
religion, it's
many
not
German people
ideology.
were not Nazis. In other words,
Right.
you see, we weren't fighting Nazism. We were fighting, an expression of Nazism in a nation. We're not fighting that today, and there's no way we can ever fight that today. I mean, because we're not fighting nations. We're not fighting Afghanistan. you know, we're trying to fight Iraq, and of course, we've lost that already, and we'll lose it eventually completely, but then
Iraq.
Iraq, yeah, Iraq, what did I say, Iraq? No, Iraq, we'll lose Iraq completely, and we'll lose that soon, so. We think we're winning, but we just wait and see.
We got time for
Okay.
2 more questions, so move along here.
Yes.
Well, as long as we're talking, this isn't really farming, I guess, but it is in a way. The immigration thing, I mean, that is really a really big drain.
Thanks a lot for bringing that
What can we do? You know, what can we do? I mean, that's really,
Well, first of all, we've got to enforce the law. We haven't done that for 20 years. And the lack of enforcement of the law over the past 20 years has caused exactly what we saw up in Postville. Is that when we do actually come in swooping in there, we see the devastation that it causes on the human level is just horrible, but also to the community. And it's just a shock to the whole system to say, my gosh, they're actually going to enforce the law finally. And because no one ever assumed or thought that it was going to happen. We've got to be consistent as far as enforcing what is the law of the land. Having said that, anyone that's found guilty of some of the charges that are potential charges that are against the owners up there, I mean, if they're in fact true, they should go to jail and throw away the key. It is outrageous what they've done to other human beings up there.
I think one of the things that the government, that we did do is that we put them in jail instead of putting them on a
Well,
plane, first class, and sending them home so they could come right back.
If it was purely an immigration violation, that's exactly what would have happened, but it was fraud. I mean, identity fraud is what they did. And it was, but you know, do you think this was like something that just happened? I mean, these people were all from Guatemala. They all came from about the same communities in Guatemala. You think there isn't just a pipeline going up there, that this was a deal where it was, I mean, an orchestrated illegal immigration invasion is what it was. Well, we've got to secure the border, we've got to enforce the law, so we've got to have a system in place where an employer can actually truly verify that employee when they apply for a job. Right now, we've got the E-Verify system, which in most states is voluntary, but employers use it. All that does is check to see if a social security number is actually valid. It doesn't actually say that that number is that person. And we've got to have some type of a way of knowing that that individual applying for a job is in fact who it is. But those things right now, I think that there's enough bipartisan support. You could actually push it, but there are people who want to have amnesty. There are people who you know, on all sides of the other issues, and until you have what some people consider to be comprehensive immigration reform, you're not going to have anything except this hit and miss, really destructive system that we have today. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've got another softball for you here. What is your understanding now of the science of global warming? And since you're on agri-programs, should we be spending a certain percentage of our ag money on addressing the issue, if you believe it's real?
Right. Well, am I totally convinced that it's entirely human cause? No. There's probably no question that there's climate change. How much of that is naturally occurring? How much is influenced by us? I think that we've got to understand that there certainly is a possibility that what is happening in global weather change, we have an influence on it. And yes, in the United States, compared to if you look at what's Beijing and the Olympics and see the kind of environment that they live, and they've cleaned it up just because the Olympics are there. What we do here is fabulous compared to what a lot of the other industrialized countries do. But I think we've got to invest in all the alternative types of fuel, be as energy efficient as we can in every way possible, and invest in the kind of research and development for the future that is going to make us very much more environmentally friendly.
Would you support a percentage of
I don't know if you can pick a percentage as such, but I think initiatives that, and putting incentives in place for vehicles that are much more energy efficient, and I don't know if you can pick the right number. I would take my idea would be to take any royalties we have from oil exploration or natural gas and put that into that type of action. And I think anything when they talk about, fuel cells in the future, hydrogen, whether that's actually going to be economically feasible, physically feasible, who knows? But I think we've got to try everything and put that investment into the research. And like I think I said earlier, I mean, we have the best scientists, the best engineers, the best technicians in the world if we'll just unleash them and let them find solutions for the future. Yeah.
It's been in the news now, if I heard right, that the oil companies got access to like 60 million acres now. Are you saying then that only 10% of the available oil is in that 60 million acres in other places? You just said 90% of the oil is...
90% of the world's, 94% of the world's oil supply is controlled today by foreign countries. Now, the 60 million acres or 68 million acres, I mean, there was this big debate about use it or lose it and all this kind of stuff. The fact of the matter is, I mean, that's current law. If you don't go after, if you have a lease on land, oil lease on land today, if you don't use it, if it's an open area, easily accessible, in 5 years, if you don't drill on it, you lose it under current law. 10 years, huh? Well, 10 years if it's very difficult access. Okay, and to me, it defies any kind of logic or economic sense for some